ollie down here once. That still looked dope. It did look dope. All you gotta do is, right when you get there,
coming down.
Oh.
So my first experience with the street was probably the Mueller Park handrail scenario, and that was the rail that was, it was a street rail, but it was up in the woods nearby Farmington. It was actually in Bountiful, pretty close to Jeremy's house. You would never go to this place to look for a rail. It's like up like a hiking trail, and there's like a picnic table or a picnic site, and there's, it just happens to be like a perfect 18-stair handrail with a natural runway to it. But that was kind of like our practice rail was like a 18-stair street rail, because there wasn't other rails to go learn on at resorts and stuff. So that was kind of our baseline, you know what I mean?
This is how JP gets all his tricks. Stunt double, baby. Ready, JP.
Ah! Yeah!
So I was shooting Brad Chaffel, I was shooting Blue Montgomery and Danny Geary, Tim Osler. I was shooting these guys, and then we would go to a couple famous Brighton jumps, and I saw some kids hitting these jumps, and I mean, they were going bigger than everybody. Just a whole different scene. And I said, who are these guys? And someone was like, hey, that's JP Walker. So I went up and introduced myself to JP, so we wanted to shoot some photos. So I started shooting him, but started realizing the talent that was there between him, Jeremy, and Tim Osler, and it was just a different, instead of just doing a method off the cliff, these guys were doing 360s off cliffs, 540s. I could tell the progression was definitely there.
Yeah, probably the first movie would be The Warriors. That was definitely the year I was living there with Mikey and Cody, and we had met JP Walker and Mitch Nelson and Jason Murphy, Tim Osler. You know, also met people like Tonino and Blue and stuff. My movies weren't that big back then, so it wasn't like, you know, big established stars like Andy Hetzel and Tina Bassich and stuff. They weren't shooting with me. But people like JP and Mitch and those guys were totally down. So I think we were just really open and friendly and just like, let's do it, man. Like, it wasn't even like, you know, you're not popular enough yet. Like, no one knew who JP was, except maybe in Brighton. But right away, we were like, holy crap, man, these kids rip.
We got into the filming, so really it came from like the skating was, I can't do this on my skateboard, but for some reason it's much easier on my snowboard. So for me, I started going to rails that I had seen that I wanted to hit on my skate, and that sort of progressed my snowboard rail scene.
My recollection is that people thought that was ridiculous. They thought street snowboarding was the silliest thing ever.
There was like this weird stigma of like rails are whack and they're stupid and you guys are wannabe skateboarders. And I'm sitting here going like, well, this is sick. This is what I grew up watching. This is what I want to do. So it was like, it was weird. Like people were vibing it. They were just wanting to kind of clown it or think it wasn't real snowboarding. And it took a while for people to change their mind to it.
Once the handrails kind of started getting more and more, because Utah is this city unlike say Lake Tahoe or Vail, you have city, terrain that you can ride. And Utah gets tons of snow. And so of course it's probably been the #1 place for handrails. We drive around after riding and next time it snows, or if maybe it already snowed, like we got to hit that or try this. And cops at that time hadn't gotten wise yet. They weren't busting people, they would just be more scratching their head.
So early 90s, mid 90s is when the video part thing really started to become a thing. Like Mack Dawg and Standard were running the show, but pretty much anyone that put out a snowboard video, you'd like consume the hell out of it. And obviously we all watched the snowboard videos, and then that was kind of the era, mid 90s, where it started to show up in Utah. Like people were filming in Utah, and then people were starting to film entire movies and projects in Utah, which is, I would credit Whitey for the first guy to like really come out here, and he was still getting his name started and right place, right time. But him being there in Utah with all of that, all of these jumps that are now so famous, have been hidden so many times. It was really the first era that all those jumps started to be hit.
When we got to the point of like living in Utah with people, like LeBlanc and JP Walker and stuff, when we started thinking of video parts, I think everybody got to that point where they knew they wanted to compete. I mean, I remember Jason Murphy having a notebook of his list of tricks and his like X's, like crossing it off. Like I have this, I need this, and then his to-do list. And so I think as we progressed, the parts became a lot more tighter. But I also was always into like goofy stuff, like our snowboard movies were, I think, a little less militant. We kind of tended to have a little bit more of the characters. J2, for instance, has been in almost all my movies, and he never was technically that skilled, proficient to almost a million snowboarders, but he was funnier than 99% of them and fun to hang out with. And he always kept things light. As my film started getting a little more popular, I always knew I liked doing funny sketches and stuff, or trying to do goofy shit. I think one of the really fun early ones we did, which was with the Rev guys, for some reason JP and Mitch Nelson were really into the Dukes of Hazzard. So we came up with an idea of doing this fake Dukes of Hazzard commercial. And we shot it in Utah with all those guys and had them dress up in different characters.
Kingpin had so much personality, and you could see like who people were through their snowboarding and when they were on a snowboard too, because they would do all these amazing skits.
Makes sense now. The way you've been driving, I can tell you've been smoking that wacky weed, boy.
Mack Dawg was just like, it was a good formula for so long. It was just the best, most progressive riding, pretty like, you know, what wasn't too crazy with editing. It was just like, this is where you go to like see the progression of snowboarding.
The consequence and the scale and scope of Chad's was just way heavier than any other jumps we'd ever hit, hands down.
One cool thing about Utah is one of the reasons why me and Mikey moved there is that Utah's, you can live in the city. Like we had a place right in the city, me and Mikey, like downtown. And we had a band and we would get to see shows like Fugazi and Lungfish and then you could be on the mountain in 22 minutes later. Like there's no other snowboarding areas in the United States, Tahoe, Oregon, none, that you are actually in a capital city and you can be on the mountain that's so good in under 30 minutes. And that was really appealing to us, you know? I was really into music still and just kind of living, not living in a hippy dippy town.